Most politicians give speeches when they win a bunch of states on a big primary night, but on Super Tuesday, Donald Trump invited reporters to Mar-a-Lago, held a news conference, and was, incredibly, pretty nice to the media.
I'm watching your people on CNN, and I'm watching the Fox people, and I'm watching the MSNBC people, too. Okay? See? I'm becoming diplomatic. And they are certainly being very nice to me tonight.
His Republican rivals now complaining that the media are in the Donald's corner.
The media coverage for Donald Trump has been almost cheerleading over the last couple weeks, and I'm convinced it's because many in the press want him to be the nominee. If Donald Trump were to ever become the nominee, immediately the hounds of hell would descend on him.
Then came the raucous Fox News debate in Detroit. Responding to an earlier Rubio jibe about his appearance, well, Trump went there.
And I have to say this, he hit my hands. Nobody has ever hit my hands. I've never heard of this one. Look at those hands. Are they small hands? And he referred to my hands. If they're small, something else must be small. I guarantee you there's no problem. I guarantee it.
Still shaking my head. But a divided decision last night with Trump winning the bigger states of Louisiana and Kentucky, but Ted Cruz taking the caucus states of Kansas and Maine, perhaps changing the media narrative. Joining us now to analyze the campaign coverage, Heidi Presbella, senior political correspondent for USA Today. Gail Trotter, an attorney and commentator who writes for the Daily Caller and Town Hall. And Mara Liasson of National Public Radio and a Fox News contributor. Heidi, are the media accurately reflecting what the Washington Post and others call pandemonium, an identity crisis, possible suicide in the Republican Party, and this last gasp assault on Donald Trump?
I was looking at some of those headlines, too. Establishment goes all in, desperate mission. And my reaction to that was, not so much. Because if you look at the details, it's more like the GOP establishment is wading in, but that's not as sexy of a headline, right?
So you think these colorful words and the headlines and the conservative crack-up and all that are a tad overhyped?
Yes, because if you look at what's actually happening, you do have some donors that we now learned about, in hindsight, got in, like the Ricketts family. There are some ads, like the Club for Growth are doing, but these are half measures, and these are coming so late that I don't think that it's really a massive assault like it's being portrayed in the media. And I think that the donors know that if they do that and they somehow succeed in taking Trump down, there would be hell to pay. It would be a massive rebellion of a sort that you're already starting to see with this populism.
And that's something we need to talk about in the coming weeks. Meanwhile, Trump making the cover of Time, which refers to him as a showman, a bully, and a demagogue. But let's talk about the conservative media, Gail Trotter. I want to play a brief clip from Sean Hannity talking about Marco Rubio's role in this campaign, and I'll ask you a question on the other side. Take a look.
Saw Rubio's attacks turning into a suicide mission, and could it actually ruin his career and destroy and hurt the Republican Party?
So here you have Hannity, for example, kind of taking Trump's side and suggesting Rubio might get out or tone down the attacks. But you have National Review and the Weekly Standard and many Fox commentators weighing in against Trump. How do you see this shaking out on the conservative side of the media?
Yeah, there's certainly a split in the conservative media. Like you said, National Review is part of the Never Trump movement, and we see other organizations like Breitbart, which have a lot of say in the conservative movement, very influential.
And what are all these folks going to do if Trump wins the nomination?
Exactly, and they're being asked about that, and they can't give a good answer because they have been arguing against Hillary being in the Oval Office for years. And so now they've painted themselves into a corner where they're going to have a very difficult time rallying around Trump if he's the eventual nominee.
Right. You know, and people tell me on Twitter and in emails, oh, you know, Fox is pro-Trump or Fox is pro-Rubio, you know, as if there's one opinion at this channel, and that's just simply not the case. You can hear all kinds of opinions, very vociferous. Mara Liasson. So Ted Cruz winning the two smaller caucus states last night. So he's won 6 states, and Trump has won, I think, 11 out of the 19 that have voted so far. Does that change the media narrative from even a few days ago when all the headlines were, is Trump unstoppable?
I think it changes it a tiny bit. Right now, Rubio is only behind Trump by less than 100 delegates. I'm sorry, Cruz is only behind Trump by less than 100 delegates. The road ahead, the states ahead look very good for Trump and not so good for Cruz. They're like Michigan, Ohio, Florida, and later it's like New Jersey, New York, and California. But I think the media has played this pretty straight. Cruz had some unexpected victories. He won his states bigger than Trump won his last night. And I think the biggest thing about the media is that everybody we're covering has no idea what they should do. That's the problem. They are clueless. Sure, some big donors, and Mitt Romney says, maybe we should try to stop him at the convention. Others say, no, that's a terrible idea. He'll bolt. The party. When you're covering the potential dissolution or crack-up of a major American political party, it's very confusing because nobody knows what's going to happen or what should happen.
Plus, we're all listening to the establishment, right? There's no Trump think tank out there, and there's no school for that. And so we're all assuming that this person...
it's Trump University.
That there's this other alternative that is going to emerge, even though we are officially folks in the 11th hour.
Yeah.
Well, some would say the media are clueless because, after all, remember all of the commentators and pundits who said Trump had no chance. I'll talk about that later. But also, in terms of the narrative turning, we heard Marco Rubio, Senator Cruz, has said the same thing, saying the media are pro-Trump, want him to win the nomination. Is that because he gets a lot of airtime, or do they really believe that journalists are rooting for Donald J. Trump?
I think in some circumstances we saw with the New York Times this week and the conversation that they had with Trump behind closed doors and the release of that information. Voters want to know what Donald Trump told the New York Times about immigration, and they're not releasing that.
But that story has been covered.
It's up to Donald Trump to release it.
Yeah,
well,
that's violating a basic journalistic principle of off the record.
We don't know who leaked it. I'll have more to say on that later in the program. Let me turn to the Detroit debate. I want to kind of take you behind the scenes because after the debate, I went downstairs to the spin room. There's maybe 200 reporters, local, national, cable folks, all getting a chance to interview Donald Trump. I didn't see the other candidates. And let me put up a picture of reporter for Extra, A.J. Calloway. There he is. I took that picture as he was comparing his hand size with that of Donald Trump. This is all on camera. And about a third of the questions were about Trump's joke about there's no problem with the size of something else. The press couldn't get enough. Here's CNN's Dana Bash asking Donald about that very point.
I can't believe I'm going to ask you this question, but do you realize that you're probably the first person in American history, maybe even world history, to make a joke about your you-know-what on a debate stage?
No, I only made a joke about my hands. I have very powerful hands.
Yeah, you went a little further than that.
I can't believe I'm asking you this question, but should the media be wallowing to this extent in this one huge moment?
No. I mean, I think it was, let's just say, unprecedented, and so maybe a follow-up question or two. But then, if you watch the news conference from last night when Trump came out of Kentucky, they asked him about it again. And
there's an entire front-page story in the New York Times headline, "A National Descent into Trump's Pants." So it is not just, sleazy television reporters.
To be fair, Rubio said at the debate, let's talk about the issues, and Trump immediately thought that the biggest issue that they had to talk about was his anatomy.
But also, to be fair, Rubio started it by making the joke about Trump's hands. Do women react differently to this? Because I think a lot of guys think it's funny, and yes, it's unprecedented, and it's easier to talk about than tax plans. Do women react differently?
I think so. It's an episode of barroom braggadocio, and I think that it was too colorful for the media not to report on it. But a lot of women and mothers are appalled that this is part of our conversation. But it's not a new low in presidential politics. Remember the Paula Jones lawsuit against Hillary Clinton's husband, Bill Clinton, when he was in the Oval Office? Paula Jones alleged that there were distinguishing characteristics about Bill Clinton's male anatomy. So this is not something new. The Republic is not coming to an end, but I think it is off-putting to a lot of women.
Right.
That wasn't the candidate.
But that at least was an actual scandal as opposed to a joke on a stage. Okay, so Mitt Romney got a lot of attention the day of the debate. He came out, he called Donald Trump a phony, a fraud, vulgar, a bad businessman, a misogynist. I lost track as I was taking notes on all of this. The media coverage seemed a little bit skeptical of Romney to me. Did you find that?
Well, I think the media coverage of the reaction to Romney, I think, was fair because the base reacted with disgust and complete contempt for that. Donald Trump supporter says, wait a second, who are you to tell me how to vote? Don't forget, Donald Trump is democratically collecting the delegates he needs to get the nomination. He's going out. This is the way you're supposed to do it. You go and get people to vote for you. But I do think the Mitt Romney thing was covered as a big, important moment in the Republican Party history. The former nominee telling the party, we have to stop the guy who's on his way to being the current nominee. I mean, it was extraordinary.
And then all the cable networks went live when Trump had a rally in which he responded to Romney. So it again became a news cycle about Donald Trump, you know, courtesy of Mitt Romney.
Yeah, I think it was a little tone deaf, right, when you're having a populist rebellion to send out the prince to try and quell the riot. But
do you agree with Mara that it's a pretty big story because of Romney's symbolic place in the GOP?
It is a big story, but I think he was probably under pressure to do that because he is, who else is the titular head of the Republican Party right now?
Because no candidate had the stature to do it, the cojones to do it, and since we're talking about this, or the willingness to do it.
But at the same time, I do think the media poured fuel on the fire. If you listen to some of the right-wing talk, for example, Rush Limbaugh was like, you should be outraged, you're being manipulated. So you tell people they should be outraged, they're going to be outraged. And
everybody's doing the double entendres. Nobody can resist. All right, I got only a few seconds, but let's put up the video of the Trump press conference with Chris Christie and a million journalists and people on Twitter all making fun of the New Jersey governor, and we see him looking there a little bit awkward. Why so much attention to that?
Well, it's really fascinating because it's a question of these pictures went viral. There was a lot of criticism of it. Was it a staging issue that he shouldn't have been standing right behind Trump? Because if you're standing there for 45 minutes, it's very easy for the cameras to catch comical facial expressions.
Yeah, in fairness, I think if you're not married to the guy, it's hard to stand there for 45 minutes in rapt admiration. All right, let me get a break here. I had Chris